don't often reflect on my childhood. To be honest, growing up, it was a strange time, something I'm sure many others can relate to in their own way, though I doubt many had the same experience. I was the odd one out, the weird kid who stayed indoors and kept to himself, wrapped up in a mess of depression and anxiety I didn't understand back then. My family, they were religious, still are, but their beliefs, they weren't what they used to be. My parents called themselves non-denominational Christians, but what they showed me, it wasn't that simple. It was oppressive. Malicious, even. I wasn't allowed to watch regular cartoons like other kids. No, I had to watch those old, low-budget Christian animated programs. You know the ones that look like they came from another era and never really fit in. The only exception were a few Disney movies, but even then, they were carefully monitored. Music? Forget it. I could only listen to praise, worship, and devotional songs, nothing else. And as for video games, they were strictly off-limits, especially anything that had violence, nudity, or magic. They called it witchcraft, and it was evil. I was homeschooled, too. Imagine that, being raised in a world so controlled, so twisted. It felt like being trapped in a box. And whenever I stepped out of line, I knew the consequences. My parents were fond of using the belt. It wasn't just that I was cut off from other kids. I was cut off from the world. It felt suffocating. Physically, emotionally, and psychologically. It wasn't until I hit my teenage years that I got any taste of freedom. But even then, it was tightly controlled. I wasn't allowed to stray far from home, and my friends, they weren't really friends, they were carefully selected by my parents, like some kind of weird elite club. It was isolating. But I'm rambling. The thing is, I don't like to think about that time. There's not much worth remembering, aside from all the grief, the pain, the torment. But there is one day I can't forget. One day that sticks with me, even now. A day I can't afford to forget. It was January 15th, 2004, and I was 8 years old. The air was cool, the kind of chill you rarely get in Florida. My parents were at work, and I was stuck at home with my babysitter, Tammy. She wasn't family, but she might as well have been. She was a friend of my mom's, and to be honest, she was pretty great. But this day was different. I remember looking forward to those days when Aunt Tammy would watch us, when my parents were away. It wasn't much, just a boring day spent cleaning around the house. Aunt Tammy and I, doing what needed to be done, nothing out of the ordinary. I had just finished my break, devouring my dinosaur-shaped chicken nuggets and wavy fries. Those were the moments I cherished. With most of the indoor chores wrapped up, Aunt Tammy asked me to start a load of laundry. It was a simple task, nothing to be afraid of, or so I thought. The washer and dryer were out in the garage, accessible through a small door in the dining room. The garage was big enough to store our old Chevy Suburban, if it weren't for the cluttered boxes, stacked high with things that wouldn't fit in the attic. Still, it wasn't too hard to move around, except that it was dark in there. Now, as a paranoid child, I had a list of irrational fears: fear of the dark, fear of things lurking in shadows. The only light in that garage came from a few gaps in the wall, just enough to let in daylight but keep out the bugs. The only other light was a dingy bulb hanging from the ceiling above the washer and dryer. For my parents, it worked. But for me, any trip into that dark space felt like a personal battle. But laundry was laundry, and I was the one to do it. So, I mustered my courage, grabbed the basket of dirty clothes, and set it atop the dryer. I filled the washer with the laundry, followed by what I thought was the right amount of detergent. I closed the lid, turned the dial, and the machine whirred to life. And that's when it happened. The bulb overhead flickered in protest, like it wasn't ready to work. It almost seemed like the power was too weak to keep it stable. As the flicker faded, something odd happened. The room seemed to glow, brighter than I'd ever seen it. The dark gaps behind the shelves and boxes were bathed in light. Shadows retreated, almost like they were afraid. I was surrounded by an unnerving, soft light that made everything appear unnatural. I turned toward the corner, my eyes drawn to something at the far end of the room, next to the sliding garage door. It was standing there. I'll never forget it. I saw something almost human, but it wasn't. It was taller than anyone I had ever met, towering above me, its head nearly touching the ceiling. Its body? Featureless, smooth, like it wanted to look human but fell short. 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 head. But it wasn't just its shape that caught my attention, it was the way it glowed. The entire thing was surrounded by a soft, shimmering blue aura, the kind of light that felt like it was alive. And it wasn't just blue. There were flashes of gold and silver that seemed to twirl around it, like little strands of light caught in a gentle breeze. The light, it flooded the room, and it felt like it was reaching into my mind, touching places I couldn't understand. It wasn't just light. It was something more. And I could swear, it felt alive. The way it stood there, in the soft glow, I couldn't help but feel like it was aware of me, aware of everything. For a few moments, we stood still, just staring at each other from opposite ends of the garage. I was terrified, absolutely petrified. The fear I had for almost everything at that age should have made me run screaming back inside. But something held me there. Oddly enough, it wasn't fear that kept me rooted to that spot. No. It felt like I had to stay. Like this being, whatever it was, wasn't here to harm me. I knew, deep down, that this encounter was important. Then, it spoke. Benjamin. It didn't have a mouth. The sound didn't come from anywhere physical, but rather from somewhere deep within me, a direct line to my mind. It wasn't just words, it was a connection, something far beyond simple speech. And somehow, I knew it knew my name. Benjamin. My heart raced, faster than I had ever felt before. Goosebumps rippled across my skin, my hair standing on end. I was frozen, unable to respond. My mind was screaming, but my body was paralyzed. Then, it spoke again. I don't remember what it said. The words, they've slipped away from me, fading with time. But when it spoke, it reached out, its right hand stretching toward me, as if asking me to take it. Its presence was calm, collected, like it was trying to show me something important, and it wanted to see if I would reach back. I couldn't. I wanted to, but the fear, no, the adrenaline, had taken hold of me. In an instant, I bolted for the door, ripping it open with a force I didn't know I had, slamming it behind me as I rushed inside. I ran, shouting, my voice a frantic cry, "Aunt Tammy! There's an angel in the garage!" Aunt Tammy rushed out of the kitchen, her face painted with confusion and worry, asking what on earth had gotten into me. But when I told her, when I blurted out those words, "There's an angel in the garage," I could see the fear in her eyes. At the time, I didn't realize it, but to an adult, those words didn't sound like a child caught up in some religious fervor. They must have sounded like a warning, like something had broken into the house. She stepped past me, calm but cautious, telling me to stay by the door as she peeked out into the garage. Nothing. The light was gone. The angel, whatever it was, had vanished. I begged her to believe me. There was no way I could explain it. Not to her. Not to anyone. But I knew what I saw. And in that moment, I believed with everything in me that it was a message from something higher. Maybe it was an angel. Maybe it was something else. But it had been there, and I couldn't forget it. Days passed. Weeks. Months. Years. The memory, once vivid, faded as I grew older. As time went on, it became less and less frequent. I started high school, the first time I really got a taste of the world outside my home. My grades were good, and I dual enrolled during my senior year. I graduated with honors. But life, as it always does, moved on. When I was 16, my dad left my mom for another woman. When I turned 18, I left home, moved into an apartment with a friend from high school. She was focused on college while I worked, moving from one job to the next, trying to find my way in the world. But no matter how far I moved, how much I grew, I couldn't shake that feeling. That something was still out there. Watching. Waiting. I'm 23 now. I don't believe in any kind of higher power anymore. If I had to put it into words, I'd say I'm agnostic at best. I share an apartment with my fiancée and our wonderful little munchkin, Gaia. I've got a pretty sweet job working in one of the highest grossing restaurants in town. I started out as a dishwasher, but now I'm part of the kitchen crew. I've made some great strides, and I can actually say I'm proud of how far I've come. Things are looking up for me in ways I never thought were possible. But now, things have changed. I've come to realize that my perfect life might not last much longer. I met my angel again last night. I woke up slowly, my eyes blinking as I found myself standing in the center of a clearing. Tall pines surrounded me, standing like silent sentinels in a perfect circle. The trees lined the edges of the clearing, and above me was a sky so blue it almost felt surreal, cloudless, bright, and unnaturally perfect. I stood upright, looking around, and that's when I saw it. The angel. It was there again, standing only a few feet away, as vibrant and real as it had been 15 years ago. The same glowing blue aura. The same calm presence. It radiated peace, but it also sent a shiver through me, deep down. But this time, something was different. The tree line shifted slightly, and that's when I noticed them. People. Standing at the edge of the clearing, staring at me, strangers, their eyes fixed on me as though they knew me, as though I was part of something I didn't understand. Every gap between the trees was filled with someone, watching. The air grew thick, and the peaceful ambience of the clearing died down. The birds stopped chirping. The insects fell silent. Even the breeze seemed to still itself, as if holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The silence stretched on, heavy and suffocating. Then, the wailing of klaxons shattered the stillness. The people in the tree line didn't move. They just stood there, still, staring. The angel raised its arms to the sky, its face calm but focused, like it was offering some sort of prayer or worship to something far above. Its eyes, or what I assumed were its eyes, were locked on the sky, as if it was waiting for something. And then, the sound came. A booming, heavenly sound, like a brass orchestra playing a glorious, elongated chord, a sound so vibrant, so pure, that it seemed to come from everywhere at once. The air itself vibrated with it, and tears rolled down my face, a deep sensation of humility overwhelming me. It felt like I was in the presence of something far greater than anything I could comprehend. But then I saw it. The blue sky above us began to change. It wasn't just the sound anymore. The sky became blotted, the blue fading as bright stars, no, comets, began to fall toward us. They rained down, fiery and blazing, falling to the earth around us like the heavens were coming to claim us. The fire from above engulfed everything, its heat and light tearing through the world, consuming everything in its wake. The angel's gaze never wavered. It stood there, arms still raised, as if waiting for something. And I didn't know what to do. What could anyone do? The cries, screams of terror and sorrow rippled through the forest, as if the very earth itself was mourning. They rose in intensity, overwhelming the clearing, overtaken by this cosmic apocalypse. The stars, once bright, fell from the heavens in a fiery storm of destruction. Then, I woke. The shock of it all hit me like a freight train. Cold sweat clung to my skin as I lay frozen in place, caught between confusion and awe. My heart raced in my chest, and the same tears that had streaked my face in the dream now traced their way down my waking cheeks. I stared up at the empty ceiling, my mind spinning in disbelief, trying to cling to the remnants of the dream. What was it? What did it mean? The sun slowly crept through the blinds, casting a pale light into the room, pulling me fully into the waking world. But something had changed in me. A memory, no, an entire flood of memories, rushed back to me in that moment. I remembered every detail of my childhood, the house I grew up in, the cluttered garage, the strange aura that surrounded those encounters with the angel. I remembered everything, except one thing. That phrase. The one that came after it spoke my name. I don't remember the words exactly, but I know it was a warning. And now, I'm sharing this with you. Don't dismiss the things you can't explain. Don't brush off the strange visions, the mysterious figures, the dreams that haunt you in the dead of night. They matter. Every encounter matters. It's all connected to the same force, a force just beyond our grasp, just out of sight. We may not understand it now, but we will, someday. If you've seen it too, if you've experienced the same thing I have, even if you don't fully remember, keep that memory close. Because I know it's not over. It's coming again. Soon. Angels are real. And they visit us in ways we don't expect, in ways we don't understand. Keep your eyes open. You don't have much time left.